Okay, now on to associates. Now, obviously, there are pros and cons, as there are with employees. There are huge pros, and it's interesting. The associates have become much more normalised in the market over the last 10 years. It used to be a lot rarer. Now it's established as a very dominant career path in consultancy, where many people are now on this track, and that poses some challenges, because if you want a specific skill set for a project, sometimes the only way to, or the only easy way to find it, is to use associates. But beyond the skill sets, having somebody external who can provide a different perspective to the client can be a good thing. Obviously, said before, they tend to be less hassle than employees, but they're also a good way to test out potential employees. And what a lot of larger firms do is use them as sort of a buffer. So, if the economy contracts or a specific market contracts, you've got sort of 20% associates that can add, flex during growth or whatever. So they're the first to go, if you have employees. On the cons level, it's all the other side of it. I mean, if you're interested in selling your firm, buyers still prefer to have employees rather than more associates. I mean, 20% is normally safe. It does depend on the sector and the type of consultancy. But again, it's this idea that employees add more asset value to the firm. And talking of that, there is that, that side of associates where they tend not to add asset value. They obviously take the experience off with them and then go and use it for whoever they're associate with next time. And also that they're not always available. In terms of when to go on, Martin. Sorry.
Let me interrupt on this one, if I may. Yeah. Just one point of clarity under your cons there, and I think you made it clear as you were talking, but just to be 100% certain, when you're talking about buyers often disliking high levels of associates, you mean the buyers of a firm when you come to sell, not the buyers of your services.
Yep. Sorry.
No, that's okay. The other thing that I would want to make clear is the difference between an associate and a contractor. So when I was in big firm, well, actually both in my own firm as a micro business and in big firms, I've used contractors, and in big firms, contractors make sense because they bring us a particular skill set that you can use, and you can typically keep them busy for 5 days a week, because most contractors are disguised employees, right? That's why IR35 exists. That'll upset a lot of people, me saying that, but I was a contractor for 3 years, and I think it's true. Not that IR35 is the right way to fix that problem. But the problem with contractors is they are looking for 5 days a week work. And the thing, as a solopreneur, when you're looking for associates, you might have a day or a couple of days of work that you've got available that you need someone to come and support you with. And if you take on contractors will confuse the term consultants. Contractors are not consultant mindset, and they don't necessarily understand the commercial reality of a consultancy. So you have to be really careful. And I had this with a contractor that I took on, where I always fixed fee my work. Therefore, I had a fixed amount of money to spend on this contractor. He was totally and deliberately oblivious to that fact and did not care. And we fell out at the end of the conversation because he felt that I should be paying him a whole load of money. It's like, you were never told that this was keep working and get paid. Yeah, how do you think a tiny firm works? So you need to be really clear on that distinction. And what I've often found in terms of my best associates, the people that have always worked best with me, are other people trying to build their own businesses, their own consulting firms. And because then you like the guy mentioned that's a client, I actually met him because I used him as a subcontractor. So I needed some CRM expertise. I met him networking, and I used him on a few projects. As his firm has grown, I now help them around the marketing side of things. So it doesn't always work that way, of course. But just to be really clear on what a contractor is and the mindset of a contractor versus someone you might use as an associate. And if you're in a big firm, big firms often say they've got an associate pool, but basically means they've got a few recruitment agencies that they use to get people available in the market. So I think there's a certain amount of bluff to an associate pool, because if people are contractors, they're either available or they're not. But just be careful if you are going to engage people. You got to make it. At the end of the day, you have to back the contractual engagement with them off the back of whatever your work is. So, for example, challenges you might have if you're on 90-day terms. Most contractors get paid by agencies on 2-week terms, 4 weeks at the worst. So if you take on somebody who has a contract mindset and is expecting you to pay him twice a month, and you've got to wait 90 days before you're even going to see any money, then you've got a cash flow issue. The way I've dealt with that in the past is I have a couple of trusted recruitment agencies. One of them got me my second contract in 97. I actually spoke to him yesterday as a bit of research on a job, but he always matches my contract terms. So if I have a gig with a client on 90-day terms, I'll tell him that they'll pay the contractor on 2-week terms, and they'll basically take the hit effectively in the short term until I pay them. But that's a very trusted long-term relationship. But it's another thing to factor in. You got to manage the cash flow, but also the way you're getting paid. So if you're on a fixed fee, you've got to make it really clear in your contract with your associates what you're expecting them to deliver. It isn't just simply a contract for time. If you're fixed fee, and it's going to be a contract for deliverables. So there's a lot of risk in this space.
That's really useful, Martin. Thank you.
Can I just pick up on Martin's thread in terms of looking at that bottom thing on the cons intends to be more expensive? And I think, Joe, you're right to emphasize that here's a model that is right for the times in terms of working in turbulence. You want something that will flex with the economies and the surprises we get. So the associate model, we can see why it has a great deal of popularity. And to play to Martin's point, how much do you pay associates? Now, I'm old enough just to remember the phrase. But the maxim in my experience was this phrase, double your money. So if you're billing out £1,000 a day, you pay your associate £500 a day. Now, that's not hard and fast, but there needs to be something in it for you. It takes time to manage an associate team. As Martin says, the terms and conditions of the associates are matched to the nature of the contract you're taking on. And I think I've always found that double your money as a useful starting point to think, why am I doing this? If you pay £800 a day to your associate and you're billing £1,000, you're probably not going to make anything on it by the time you have managed said associate. So you might be doing that type of thing purely to access the associate's capability, intellectual property, or to help move your business forward in a certain way. So there needs to be a logic, both strategically and financially, that it makes sense. So I've always found double your money as a good starting point for thinking.
Thank you. That is very useful. Martin, go on.
Yeah, let me share a story on that. You thought this was going to be a short session.
I did.
I think double your money is so brilliant as a way to look at this, because all the people that you engage will think that every bit of value comes from them, right? They'll pitch up on your project and they'll go, "Oh, why are you making so much money off me?" It's like, well, because you wouldn't even flipping be here if I hadn't have solved the job. Who do you think paid for all that marketing and sales time? But people are oblivious to that, particularly that contract mindset. But I'll share a story of something that happened to me, which is I have a long-standing client for many, many years, and I had an opportunity to do a piece of work with them, which I just subbed out effectively because it was just a project management gig. I didn't need to do it. I took on a contractor to deliver it. And I thought this guy was all right, actually. It wasn't a contractor. It was a guy through someone I knew. It's too complicated to explain. But I like the guy. For whatever reason, he just didn't get on with this client. And this client is very, very particular. If they don't like people, they don't like people. And I was on holiday and got called, and they were like, "Get this guy off site now. We don't want to see him again. He's an idiot. We're not interested in you." Like, you're on holiday for one, so it's very difficult to be able to deal with it. But long story short, we obviously removed him from site. I wasn't unhappy with him. I think it's just his face didn't fit, essentially. But then when I got back and I had a meeting with the client, the client's view was that he wasn't going to pay for some of the time that this guy worked on site because he said that he was useless. But I had a commitment to pay this guy. So it was a shortfall of around $5,000 essentially. But what was interesting, just to really complicate the situation, the client that was annoyed with my person that wanted this money back effectively used to work for me, right? So there was a certain kind of bravado and such forth in this whole scenario. So I ended up speaking to his boss, who was ultimately my sponsor, and saying to him, I didn't want him to go and put this other guy in line, because that wouldn't then put the senior guy in a good light, because it's like he's undermined his own character. So I ended up agreeing with him. I said, look, I'll give you, I think it was half. I think he was asking for 10 grand, and I said 5, and I said I'll give you 5 grand back, but obviously I'm not going to give you 5 grand back. I'll discount the next project we do together by 5 grand, which then allowed the guy that was demanding the refunds to not lose face. It meant that his boss didn't seem to be undermining him, and it meant that I had effectively capitulated to a degree. And in reality, I then roped them into doing another piece of work with me, so I wasn't at risk of the whole thing evaporating. A long story, sorry, but interesting, just in terms of some of the risks that you can have when you're using associates. So it can cost you money. So as Simon says, that's a long way to explain W money, but very sage advice.
You saved me explaining it later. Let's put it that way.
Sorry.
No, that's good. No, it means we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. I'm going to go. There might be some discussion around the next slide. I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb. So I think there are 3 reasons for using associates, and if you don't hit one of these 3 reasons, you should probably be thinking about using employees. Number 1, you need short-term, occasional expert resource. Number 2, you cannot recruit sufficiently skilled employees. A lot of people say that, and they haven't really tried. And number 3, you need more flexible resourcing for the unexpected peaks and trough. Are we loosely in agreement there, Simon?
Yeah, I am.
There we go.
Any disagreement would be purely semantic, but as the sentiment, yeah, rock solid. Nice one.
Martin?
Yeah. I third that completely.
Excellent.
Agree.
Let's move on before we get into trouble. I'm not even going to ask about semantics. We'll cover that in the live session. Okay, so some quick tips around managing associates. Recruit in the same way that you'd recruit an employee, I think. Certainly if they're not coming to you on a recommendation, or you've just bumped into them, do their values fit? Are they competent? You could grill them on the CV. And once they're in, then try and make them part of the family, because you've got to remember, with associates, it's a competitive market for a good associate. And sometimes they'll need to make the decision, do they come and work for you versus coming to work for someone else? And if you've built that personal relationship, they're more likely to come and work for you. Very clear rules on, what happens with referrals or testimonials. Can they get follow-on work from the client if it's their specialism? What happens with branding? You obviously train them in your methods, your quality assurance and your values. And talking of quality assurance, certainly early on, you want to be working with them quite closely and making sure their work is up to standard. This isn't always possible, but associates are best used for delivery. They're not best used for internal work for obvious reasons. They should have the firm templates and emails. And we're all spot on. Ideally, pay them around 50%. You might want to further edge that your way in terms of volume discounts, taking 10% off for a week's work or 20% off for a month's work. But I'm a bit meaner than these 2 guys. Go on, Simon.
No, it was just to add a little bit on a couple of points. Making them part of the family. With our associates, they always came to the work socials, including the Christmas do.
That's nice.
So that was practically how they were made to be part of the family. And now, be careful with the use of the word never. But the majority of associate relationships I've had, the associate, she or he is kicked back against the email template and the using an organizational domain. So with our firm, everybody has forename, then the name of the firm as the domain.
Yeah,
what it is called.
Great.
And when you say you're part of the family, then here you are, Joe at and Martin at. People give you 1,001 reasons why that is just totally inconvenient, and they've got an email set up anyway, and they're going to continue to use theirs. So I think it's getting easier with the advances in the way we do emails anyway. But I totally agree. Have firm emails and templates. In my experience, people give you 1,001 reasons why that just is not possible.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who uses Outlook can easily add another email.
Yeah. I would just add one thing, not about the email. I think use my email or don't work for me. Simple. But something that happened to me back in '97 again, when I took on my first, contract. One of my first contracts, it was for a consultancy, and the client at the time was Estee Lauder. Interestingly, so working, you can imagine with my looks, it was obvious why they recruited me. But the previous guy, it was a project management gig, and the previous guy from the consultancy was a contractor, but didn't enjoy it and spent all his time on the phone to recruitment agencies and really upset the client. So what they did, which was very shrewd, they didn't want the same thing to happen where I would just disappear partway through the job. So they kept a portion of my daily rate back until the end as a completion bonus. And I've actually used that quite a few times over the years now as well. It's quite a nice tactic. So if you ever, because people will always run for more money or whatever, and these are contractors, so this is not an employee relationship, there's no concern there. But effectively you give a day rate, but then you say, 15-20% of that is held back to be paid as a bonus on completion of either milestones or dates or whatever. But it's a useful way of just keeping them positively engaged as well.
I love the language completion bonus to mean handcuff.
Yes. As long as the job gets done well. Okay.
I did get. By the way, I'll just add. I've got lots of stories about working at Estee Lauder, but I'll only share this one. There was a factory shop where you could get all of the seconds. So if you ever wonder why I look the youngest of the three of us, and we do all look vastly different anyway, it is because of all of those free anti-aging creams and such forth.
Oh, splendid. You've only been applying it to your ears, though, haven't you?
Thanks for that.
Right. Okay. So that's enough on associates.